Fire off.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to get straight to the point. You know, I attend Clark Atlanta University, this illustrious HBCU, and I know that you also went to HBCU. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience at FAMU and how that shaped you into who you are today?
I think the beauty of a Black college experience is that you are surrounded by professors and faculty and staff who I believe are more likely to see you for what you can become instead of only judging you based on what you currently are. I think to have a quality college experience, you need people who see the potential in you. And I'm a kid that made a lot of mistakes in college. I was goofing off a lot, stole jeans, got arrested, like all types of stuff. And I wouldn't have graduated from the journalism school if I didn't have people that were kind of tugging my coat a little bit, those last 2 years of school going, hey man, you need to keep it straight. And so, for that, I'll forever be thankful to Florida A&M University, even though I almost came to Clark, man. And I'm not even saying that just because I'm talking to you. It was Clark, Tennessee State, FAMU. Those were the three that I had to boil down to. And then what had happened was I wanted to play baseball. Tennessee State at the time in 96, they didn't have a baseball team. Clark, I think, had a team, but FAMU's was a little better. And I was like, let me go down FAMU. Plus my mama FAMU, my daddy FAMU. So I was like, all right, I might have some connections, which I ended up needing to keep my ass in school. So, it was the right thing. That's how God works. So, I ended up where I was supposed to be. No disrespect to the CAU though.
Yeah. Okay. FAMU, they have a great program too. So we love the HBCU community. But speaking of your parents, so I know that your father was active with the civil rights community. How did that impact your social views, your upbringing?
My dad was extremely conscious. He covered, the line I always say is, if Dr. King was there, my dad was 3 rows back with a tape recorder.
Yeah.
So, he also embedded himself in Vietnam on purpose.
Oh, wow.
To get a firsthand look at the mistreatment of Black soldiers. He was in South Africa during their riots in Soweto. He was, in Rhodesia, well, Zimbabwe now, but then Rhodesia, and covering that civil war. So, my pops has always been at the center of Black struggle and, trying to get a grip and make sense of it. So, I would go with him on speaking engagements and stuff, but a lot of that stuff didn't land at the time because I'm 12, I'm 13. But somewhere around 25, 26, you start thinking about all that other stuff.
It starts to impact you personally.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because now you're out in the world and you're experiencing the stuff that he was talking about. And keep in mind, I can't speak for Atlanta, but Birmingham proper, like the Birmingham city limits, is still 75% Black. I had a predominantly Black, a landslidingly Black upbringing. Black neighborhood, Black church, city schools, all mostly Black. I don't think I had more than 3 white classmates, other than the one time I got bussed out to the one pocket of town where white people were in the 6th grade. So, you grow up in a bit of a bubble.
Yeah.
A Black bubble to a degree. And then you go to, Black ass college as well.
Right.
Then you get out into the world and you go, that's what my daddy was talking. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So a lot of people say, when you attend a HBCU, you don't get the same experience that other people get at PWIs, that they don't really prepare us for the real world. What are your views on that?
I don't think that an HBCU experience leaves you shorthanded on how to deal with the world. If anything, it leaves you a little more empowered because you don't get out into the world wondering what the hell this is. Like I just said, I got out into the world and I went, oh, that's what they were talking about. That's what they were telling me about. This is what I've been being prepared for, versus what the hell is this? I've never experienced this before. Because you can go to a PWI and you can have a lot of white classmates who don't see color and they always treat you nice. And it might give you a false sense of reality of
Yeah.
what's out there in some capacities. I do commend though, and I think it's important to note this. I do commend the black students that choose to go to PWIs for trying to create inclusive experiences for themselves and their fellow black classmates, because you may not have a PWI that gave you the money or the financial aid approval, or you might live on the West Coast where you just don't want to be that far from home. There's a million and one reasons to not go to a black college. It don't mean that you can't try and create a little pocket of blackness for yourself wherever you are. And I think that is important.
Mhm.
And me personally, I'm hesitant to attack those students. I'm hesitant to attack black students at PWIs who have chosen to go to a PWI and have chosen to try to create something for themselves there. It's just that when you start attacking and talking trash
Yeah.
and throwing jabs at black colleges, well, I'm going, hold on now,
That's
watch your
it's a
mouth,
different conversation.
watch your mouth, partner.
Yeah.
Now. you know, that's
Mhm.
that's where I think, you know, that's where I think we fail each other
Yeah.
as a race. You know,
As a community.
we talking about black folks who went to college, and most of them, PWI or HBCU, are first gen college students.
Exactly. First time.
But y'all trying to
So
have a status quo argument.
with all the elections that are taking place right now, what made you want to bring the Daily Show to Atlanta? What inspired that?
Well, the Daily Show has always been a show where, we go traditionally to swing states during midterms and presidential elections. Well, during presidential elections, we go to the cities where the conventions are, but during midterms, we bounce around. We went to Illinois one year, to Chicago, because there were a lot of key state senate and congressional races. We ended up in Florida 4 years ago during the Andrew Gillum Ron DeSantis battle, which came down to literally a couple 200-300 ballots
Yeah.
down in Broward and Dade County. So there are a lot of pockets where we believe people need to be plugged in on what the hell is going on, because the fate of that state could also sometimes tip to what the fate of the nation could be. And I think it's undeniable that with what's happening between Warnock and Walker, I
Mhm.
almost said Reverend Walker, Reverend Warnock
Yes.
and Football Man,
Mhm.
and Kemp and Abrams. And also there's a number of state laws that Georgia's passed and that are trying to get passed that I believe are microcosms of what's happening at a national level. So, when Trevor Noah and the producers and they sit down every midterms and decide, where do we go? Arizona was a discussion, too hot. We talked about Wisconsin, too cold.
Yeah.
And Atlanta also is 2 hours from Birmingham, where I'm from. So, I went into the meeting like, I
Right.
really think Atlanta
A good
is,
idea, right?
you know, the biggest. Hey, mom, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be home. I'm gonna be home real
Right.
quick.
Okay, so according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, as you already said, Georgia is positioned to be one of the nation's key battleground states. So, based on the decision of Democrat Stacey Abrams and former Republican David Perdue to challenge Governor Brian Kemp, do you think the outcome of this race is going to define the state's political makeup and maybe shape the presidential vote?
The governor has the ability to help certify elections. So, what happens in 2 years if Georgia has a close presidential election?
Yeah.
And those electoral college votes are the tiebreaker and whether or not you have a Democrat or Republican in the highest position in the country.
Mhm.
So, the gubernatorial race, 1,000,000%
Yeah.
defines that. There are bills that have been passed by the skin of their teeth,
Mhm.
in this country in the past 2 years that Warnock and Ossoff definitely were pivotal in helping to get passed.
Yeah.
So if you have Herschel Walker in there, I don't know how much of that stuff you get passed, and I think that's the part of it that is very, very difficult for a lot of people to understand. At the end of the day, I do believe that we as voters, we're worried about ourselves. We are all, to a degree, single issue voters. but there's not always a look at the totality of a vote and where a vote go. Like if you vote for Walker because he'll help you locally, you're
Mhm.
not thinking about the national ramifications for that. And you probably don't care because you live in Georgia. You don't live in another state where rights, women's rights are going to be violated, or where, you know, people's rights to a fair education or veterans' rights. Like so those things don't always we tend to not always vote with the safety of the hive
Yeah.
in mind. We vote, in a very individualistic basis.
Yeah. So as a former HBCU student, a lot of my peers, they would say, well, I'm not from Georgia. I don't feel like I need to vote, even though you're kind of living here now. What are some things that you would say to a person that feels like, well, I don't need to vote because I'm technically not a resident here?
I mean, if you live here and you benefiting off of stuff, then yeah, you need to vote. I know it's different for college students because you might be registered at the crib because technically living on campus may not count. I don't know the rules here, but I know in the state of Florida, being in college wasn't enough for you to flip registration unless you wanted to. I would say learn those rights, learn your rights as a voter.
Mhm.
Voting is important, period, full stop. Then the next layer of that is where you're voting. Because
Yeah.
if it's Georgia, it might be a place where the vote is really needed. Or, if you're living back home in say South Carolina and locally that those elections are a little more contested, if there's a way for you to legally still stay a registered South Carolina voter while being in school in Georgia,
Yeah.
maybe that's where you cast votes. And maybe you do mail-ins, maybe you do absentees. I do think that I just wish that there was a more unified process nationally,
Mhm.
on voting, because I do think that it's made confusing on purpose to disenfranchise the marginalized.
Yeah.
But I don't see how that changes unless we vote and unless you use your voice.
Absolutely. So, with the Daily Show being a satire on serious issues that are taking place in the Black community, in our communities every day, do you believe that the entertainment industry have a huge influence on shaping the vote, especially in Georgia?
We debate that all the time. Um, because we like to say we're a comedy show first, and we are. But then you also see data where people get a bulk of their news from the Daily Show.
Mhm.
So there's still a responsibility to give proper information and then allow the people to do what they will with that information. But our job above all is to give truthful reporting, but
Mhm.
we have to make it funny.
Yeah.
If it's not funny, we can't touch it. If there's no way to make it funny, we can't touch it. There's certain tragedies and atrocities that happen in the country. And even in that, Trevor may talk about the incident itself,
Mhm.
but for us to safely find comedy around something sad, you either have to go and attack the causation of the tragedy or the solution to prevent the tragedy from happening again.
Yeah.
And within that, there's usually a person or some malfeasance that you can kind of zero in on and just drill at that. And that becomes the true north of that segment.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I know that it's going to be very inspiring to other people. It's going to get people really talking about the Daily Show, and I just appreciate all that you guys do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a good one.